Lieutenant Ryan's boots struck the polished tarmac with a measured rhythm, echoing across the sprawling naval base like a heartbeat. The morning sun glinted off hangars and armored vehicles, painting the metal in harsh gold and silvers. Rows of flagpoles fluttered their banners, each one a silent testament to the discipline and history embedded in the base. The air carried the faint tang of salt, oil, and diesel, mingled with the sharp metallic scent of weapons, and Ryan inhaled deeply, trying to steady the nervous energy rising in his chest. This wasn't just any assignment. It was a proving ground. A place where every movement, every glance, every detail mattered. He had arrived early, a half hour before the scheduled joint inspection. Normally, this might have been an advantage, but today it felt like a gamble. Veterans of the field, some decades older, eyes sharper than hawks, would watch, judge, and catalog every error, every lapse in posture, uniform, or confidence. Ryan's uniform was immaculate. His boots shined until the black polish reflected the morning sky, his ribbons and medals perfectly aligned. Yet even perfection could be dismissed here, as rookie naivety of the observer was seasoned enough. As he walked toward the main assembly area, Ryan scanned the bustling environment. Officers moved with effortless precision, their posture erect, hands swinging naturally at their sides, eyes always forward. The SEALs, a smaller contingent, exuded quiet menace, athletic, lean, moving like coiled predators even in casual conversation. Ryan's chest tightened at the sight. For years, he had trained, drilled, and studied military discipline in classrooms and training grounds, but nothing compared to the palpable authority radiating from these men. He felt simultaneously inspired and painfully aware of his status as the newcomer. The sounds of the base were a symphony of controlled chaos. Boots thudded in rhythm across concrete. Officers barked orders with clipped tones, and somewhere in the distance, engines idled on ships tethered to the dock. A helicopter lifted off, its blades chopping the air in a hypnotic cadence. Ryan reminded himself to breathe, keeping his composure, forcing the knots of anxiety to loosen. His mentor's words echoed. Respect is earned, not assumed. Stand tall, act with integrity, and the rest will follow. Approaching the assembly area, Ryan noticed the subtle hierarchy etched into every line and posture. Younger recruits fidgeted with their uniforms, nervously checking every button and ribbon. Experienced officers leaned against vehicles or pillars, arms crossed, observing the rookies with faintly condescending smiles. Ryan's instincts told him some would quietly test him, either through overt remarks or veiled mockery. He squared his shoulders and reminded himself that focus was his strongest ally today. He was aware of whispers immediately upon arrival. A group of senior non-commissioned officers leaned slightly, exchanging smirks as they inspected the newcomers. "That's his first assignment?" One murmured, voice low enough that Ryan had to strain to hear. Another nodded, glancing at his uniform with a faint sneer. "Nice rookie patch." The words stung, though not physically, yet their weight was undeniable. Ryan's fingers flexed inside his gloves. The urge to respond, defend himself, flare back, surged, but he bit it down. He remembered what his father, a retired officer, had said, "Patience isn't passive. It's strategy. Let them test you. Your actions will speak louder than their words." As he stepped into the center of the tarmac, he surveyed the environment with the meticulous eyes of a soldier. The base itself was vast, a city of steel and discipline. Barracks stretched in neat lines, each identical, a testament to order. Armored vehicles lined up with military precision, and in the distance, the flag of the United States flew high, proud against the clear sky. Ryan felt a rush of pride at being part of this, tempered by the humility of his newness. Every veteran around him represented years, decades of experience he had yet to earn. The sun climbed higher, sending sharp beams across the tarmac. Shadows of the assembled soldiers stretched long and rigid, mirroring the rigid discipline expected of them. Ryan's eyes followed each line, each formation, memorizing the subtle cues, the slope of a shoulder, the angle of a hand, the cadence of a footfall. Every detail mattered. Every detail would be noted. He took a deep breath and walked toward his assigned position, the weight of observation pressing down like armor. A senior officer stepped toward him, clipboard in hand, and offered a curt nod. "Lieutenant Ryan, report for inspection," he said, voice firm, edged with authority that demanded compliance without question. Ryan saluted crisply, the click of his boots marking each step as he moved to his spot. The rows of soldiers were now forming, and the whispers that had accompanied his arrival seemed to fade under the command of disciplined voices. Yet the tension lingered, an invisible electric field that made his muscles taut. Around him, the elite SEAL team moved like a shadowy wave through the formation, their movements controlled yet effortless, commanding an unspoken awe. Ryan felt dwarfed beside them, their confidence radiating in measured strides and precise gestures. Every eye followed them, measuring, noting, silently acknowledging their expertise. And yet, even in this intimidating presence, he found a small flicker of determination ignite. He could not let intimidation define him. He had his own path, earned through hard work and relentless discipline, and today would be the first test. A gust of wind swept across the tarmac, carrying the metallic tang of weapons, salt from the nearby docks, and the faint scent of engine oil. Ryan's heart thudded in rhythm with the wind, each beat a reminder that he was on a stage where any slip, any tremor of uncertainty, could be noticed, catalogued, and judged. He adjusted his tie again, checking that his ribbons and medals lay perfectly. Small details mattered more than he had imagined. They were the language of competence here, spoken fluently by veterans, quietly assessed in silence. He caught sight of another group of young officers, faces tight with nervous energy. Some whispered to each other, muttering jokes or complaints under their breath. Ryan understood immediately. This was part of the test. They were observing not just movement or appearance, but the ability to maintain composure under pressure. His resolve hardened. No matter the whispers, the smirks, the subtle jabs, he would remain unshakable. Confidence, even quiet, was contagious, and he intended to radiate it. Moments later, the commanding officer's whistle sliced through the morning air. Boots snapped to attention, a ripple of precision moving through the assembled rows. Ryan's body followed instinctively, each movement exact, each gesture deliberate. The training he had poured into his muscles and mind responded perfectly, yet his heart still thudded with awareness. This was more than rehearsal. This was reality, and every officer present could distinguish between studied practice and innate discipline. Ryan's gaze swept across the assembly one last time. The sun glinted off badges and medals, shadows forming sharp angles across the tarmac. He took a slow, measured breath, letting the tension drain slightly, grounding himself in the present moment. Despite the nerves, the whispers, the judging eyes, he felt ready. This inspection, was more than a test of his uniform. It was a test of character, resilience, and the quiet strength to earn respect where it had not yet been given. And so, standing tall on the tarmac, Lieutenant Ryan awaited the first order, the first glance, the first moment that would define him in the eyes of those who had already earned their authority. The day ahead promised challenge, scrutiny, and a trial of every ounce of patience, discipline, and courage he possessed. The base hummed with anticipation, and Ryan, though tense, felt a spark of determination he knew would guide him through every judgment, every sneer, and every silent test waiting in the hours to come. Lieutenant Ryan adjusted the collar of his uniform as he stepped into the assembly area, his boots clicking sharply against the concrete. The morning sun now sat higher in the sky, casting crisp shadows across the rows of soldiers standing at attention. He could feel the intensity in the air, a silent pressure that pressed down on every newcomer. The veterans weren't just observing. They were testing. Every movement, every glance, every posture could be interpreted as confidence or weakness. And Ryan knew that, in this world, perception often mattered as much as reality. The first whispers began almost immediately. A group of senior non-commissioned officers, leaning slightly against a vehicle, exchanged subtle smirks. "Look at him," one murmured, voice low and sharp, fresh out of training. Another chuckled softly, glancing at Ryan's insignias. "Nice rookie patch," he added, the words laced with quiet derision. Ryan felt the heat rise in his neck, a familiar flush of irritation mixed with anxiety. It was a test of his composure, and he knew it. If he reacted with visible anger or defensiveness, it would mark him as inexperienced, unworthy of serious consideration. He squared his shoulders and held his head high, forcing himself to focus on the task ahead. His eyes scanned the environment, taking in every subtle cue. The veteran's posture, the relaxed yet precise way they held themselves, the small nods and gestures exchanged between them, all of it spoke volumes about experience and hierarchy. Ryan's training had prepared him for drills and technical knowledge, but nothing could have prepared him for this intricate dance of silent assessment. This was psychological warfare, and he was the newest recruit in the battlefield of perception. As the inspection lineup continued to form, Ryan noticed other young officers fidgeting nervously, checking buttons and medals, adjusting collars and gloves. Some whispered to each other, trading small jokes or reassurances, trying to mask their own fear. The difference was glaring. The veterans moved with casual precision, breathing with a rhythm that suggested absolute control, while the newcomers radiated tension, every muscle taut with anticipation. Ryan tried to emulate the veterans, letting his movements be deliberate but relaxed, controlled but natural. It was harder than it looked, yet necessary. Any sign of trembling could be noticed and recorded in the silent ledger of judgment. The whispers escalated slightly. One officer, with a subtle sneer, leaned closer to his colleague. "I bet he's never even seen a SEAL up close," he said, eyes flicking toward the elite team standing to one side. Another added, "He'll crumble the moment the commander approaches." Ryan caught the glint in their eyes, a mixture of arrogance and curiosity, and forced himself to breathe steadily. He reminded himself that this was part of the ritual, part of the process every newcomer faced. Those who cracked under scrutiny revealed themselves. Those who endured gained respect, slowly but surely. Despite the whispers, Ryan felt a growing sense of awareness. Every detail of his uniform had been meticulously prepared, boots polished to a reflective sheen, insignias perfectly aligned, ribbons neatly arranged. He had double-checked every element this morning, yet he realized that no amount of preparation could shield him from judgment entirely. Here, appearances were only the opening note. Competence, composure, and presence would carry the weight. He resolved to let his actions speak louder than the murmurs surrounding him, to let his dedication shine quietly under the scrutiny of those who thought themselves superior. Nearby, he noticed one of the SEALs, tall, lean, and impossibly composed, glancing in his direction. There was no sneer, no mockery, only an observant gaze that seemed to measure more than just his appearance. Ryan felt a jolt of recognition. These men, though intimidating, were also fair in their assessment. They noticed what mattered. And though fear still tinged his nerves, there was also a spark of confidence. If he moved correctly, carried himself properly, and performed with precision, even these elite soldiers would acknowledge his place. Ryan shifted slightly, maintaining posture while letting his mind review the inspection sequence. The whistle, the commands, the cadence of movement, all rehearsed countless times in training. Yet the stakes here were exponentially higher. He wasn't just practicing. He was proving. And proving meant more than avoiding mistakes. It meant exuding quiet confidence, even in the face of judgment. His chest tightened as he felt the weight of the assembly's attention, but he exhaled slowly, focusing on the rhythm of his own heartbeat, letting the controlled breathing calm his nerves. Around him, the whispers continued, though now tinged with fascination rather than pure derision. A few young officers tried to mimic his posture, noting how he carried himself in spite of the subtle attacks. Ryan was aware of every glance, every small movement, each an unspoken test of endurance and discipline. The morning sun glinted off polished metal and metals, highlighting insignias and casting sharp lines across uniforms. The visual precision of the formation was mesmerizing, and Ryan felt a quiet pride in being part of the rhythm, part of the moving structure. One officer stepped forward to begin the preliminary inspection, clipboard in hand. "Lieutenant Ryan," he called, voice firm but not unkind. "Hold position." Ryan snapped to attention, heels together, chin lifted, hands straight at his sides. The officer circled slowly, eyes scanning every inch of his uniform. "Impressive polish," he muttered quietly, almost to himself, pausing at Ryan's insignia. Ryan held his breath, aware that this small acknowledgement, though subtle, was significant. The first sign of recognition had arrived, a tiny but meaningful victory in a day already heavy with scrutiny. Even as the initial inspection concluded, the murmurs and stifled laughter continued from the sideline veterans. "He's trying too hard," one whispered, "but maybe there's more to him than I thought." Ryan felt a flicker of satisfaction, tempered by awareness that the true test had not yet begun. This was merely first impressions, an opening act to the more formidable evaluation that would come when the SEAL commander approached. He tightened his jaw, focusing on maintaining composure, every muscle primed but relaxed, ready for the next stage. A gust of wind swept across the tarmac, rustling the flags and tugging gently at collars and jackets. Ryan's chest rose and fell with measured breaths, grounding himself in the moment. He realized that this inspection was not just about outward appearances. It was a test of mental fortitude. The whispers, smirks, and subtle judgments were as much a part of the challenge as the physical performance. Success here required mastery over both body and mind, a delicate balance between confidence and humility, precision and flexibility. As he glanced across the rows, he noticed the SEAL team again, standing apart, watching quietly. Their presence was commanding, yet strangely reassuring. Unlike the mocking officers, they did not whisper, they did not smirk, they simply observed, measuring competence without condescension. Ryan felt a swell of determination. This was where he would earn respect, not through words, but through unwavering performance. The knowledge that real authority would recognize him if he proved himself gave him a new kind of courage, a quiet fire that pushed away the lingering unease. Finally, the preliminary roll call concluded, and the first formal orders for inspection echoed through the air. Ryan's muscles tensed in anticipation. Every step, every salute, every glance mattered. He had survived the initial scrutiny, but he knew that the hardest test the encounter with the SEAL commander was yet to come. And yet, for the first time, he felt a surge of confidence. He had withstood mockery, held his composure, and demonstrated the quiet competence that would earn him true recognition. The day was only beginning, but Lieutenant Ryan was ready. The shrill blast of the whistle cut through the morning air, sharp and commanding. Lieutenant Ryan's boots snapped to attention instantly, heels together, chin high, chest rigid. Around him, the rows of soldiers shifted with synchronized precision, every movement echoing the countless hours of drill, sweat, and discipline that had gone into their training. For Ryan, this was no longer just an exercise. It was a proving ground, and every step, every gesture, could be the difference between earning respect or fading into irrelevance. The first commanding officer approached, clipboard in hand, scanning the formation with meticulous precision. Each row, each uniform, each insignia was catalogued, noted, and evaluated in silence. Ryan's heartbeat accelerated, but his outward demeanor remained flawless. He reminded himself, this is the moment to be seen, not heard. To perform, not explain. He had trained for this, yet nothing had fully prepared him for the intensity of being watched by dozens of eyes, each experienced and critical, judging both skill and character. The SEAL team moved with a subtle, dangerous grace along the far side of the formation, like predators observing potential allies and threats alike. Their presence was electrifying, not aggressive, but commanding a quiet authority that demanded attention without speaking. Ryan tried not to stare, but he couldn't help noting their precise movements, the effortless strength in their posture, and the calm focus in their eyes. These men had faced situations he couldn't imagine. Yet today, he would stand beside them, at least in formation, and be measured by the same invisible yardstick. As the inspection commenced, the officer approached each soldier individually, pausing to scrutinize boots, ribbons, patches, and collars. When he reached Ryan, his gaze lingered slightly longer than expected. Ryan's breath tightened, and he held still, waiting for the first judgment. The officer's eyes scanned every detail, pausing briefly at a particularly bright metal. "Impressive polish," he muttered quietly, almost under his breath. That small acknowledgement, subtle as it was, sent a rush of relief through Ryan's body. He had survived the first tangible evaluation without faltering. Despite this small victory, the whispers from the sidelines persisted, faint but present. A group of older officers exchanged glances and subtle smirks. "Trying a little too hard, isn't he?" One murmured. Another added, "I give him 10 minutes before he cracks." Ryan felt the familiar heat of irritation rise, but he forced it down, exhaling slowly. His focus returned to the rhythm of the inspection. Every movement counted. Every twitch, misalignment, or hesitation could undermine the careful control he had cultivated. The whistle sounded again, signaling the start of the marching drill. Ryan moved in exact cadence with the roll, boots striking the tarmac with a sharp, measured beat. His arms swung with precision, shoulders squared, posture impeccable. He could feel the weight of eyes on him from every direction, the mocking officers, the silent veterans, the SEALs, each measuring competence with imperceptible calculation. Yet with each step, he felt his confidence grow, rooted in training and reinforced by a quiet determination. He was no longer just a newcomer. He was a participant in a living, breathing machine of discipline. The inspection officer walked slowly along the line, scrutinizing formations and execution. His sharp eyes detected even the slightest deviation. A boot misaligned, a hand out of place, a subtle tilt of the head. Ryan's muscles burned slightly from maintaining perfection, but he refused to let it show. This was more than endurance. It was mental control, the ability to project flawless confidence under extreme observation. He noticed a few young officers faltering, their movements slightly jerky, hesitation creeping into their otherwise precise motions. He swallowed a silent sigh of relief, aware that maintaining composure under stress was as impressive as physical accuracy. Nearby, he caught sight of the SEAL commander standing apart from the main formation, observing silently. Unlike the mocking officers or the clipboard-carrying inspectors, the commander radiated quiet authority. His eyes moved deliberately, scanning the group without visible judgment. Yet Ryan sensed that every action, every gesture was being measured. The realization was intimidating, but it also provided clarity. This was the moment to demonstrate competence through controlled execution, not words. Respect here would be earned in silence, through precision, discipline, and unwavering focus. As the marching drill continued, Ryan's mind shifted into a zone of hyper-awareness. He noted the subtle rhythms of the boots around him, the slight variations in cadence among his peers, and the minor adjustments they made to align with perfection. Each small correction was critical, and he instinctively mirrored the best examples, adjusting posture, swing, and alignment with precision. The air was heavy with the scent of sweat, polish, and the faint metallic tang of the weapons nearby. Every inhale reminded him of the stakes. Every exhale helped steady his nerves. The inspection escalated as the officer called for complex maneuvers, pivoting, halting, saluting simultaneously, and executing exact steps under precise commands. Ryan's muscles remembered each motion from countless hours of training, yet the presence of onlookers added a layer of psychological challenge. He felt the tension in every fiber of his body, each move executed under pressure. Around him, others stumbled slightly, minor imperfections magnified by scrutiny. Ryan's focus sharpened errors could be forgiven if minor, but composure could not. The line between success and embarrassment was razor thin. During a pause in the drill, Ryan caught whispers from a small group of officers nearby. "He's holding it together better than I expected," one admitted, a hint of respect in the tone. Another added, "I wonder if he's as skilled as he looks." Ryan remained outwardly neutral, letting no hint of satisfaction escape his expression. Every subtle acknowledgement was important, but he knew the true test was still ahead, the SEAL commander's approach. He had weathered mockery and casual judgment, yet the ultimate measure of respect had not yet arrived. The whistle signaled another adjustment in formation, demanding split-second attention and flawless execution. Ryan responded instantly, pivoting and aligning with the line, eyes forward, chin high, posture impeccable. The officer's gaze swept across the formation, noting the precision of each individual. Ryan felt the growing rhythm of his confidence muscles moving perfectly in cadence, mind attuned to the instructions, eyes scanning silently for small errors. Even in the midst of observation, he felt a quiet pride in executing flawlessly, aware that each step was a small victory against the subtle judgments surrounding him. Time seemed to stretch as the inspection continued. Each pass of the officer's gaze was measured, deliberate, evaluating not just appearance but presence, composure, and potential. Ryan felt both the weight and the exhilaration of being fully seen, fully tested. He could feel the tension around him, the energy of the veterans, the quiet anticipation of the SEALs, the scrutiny of peers, all combining into a single, heavy current of evaluation. Every action mattered. Every moment of hesitation could define him in the eyes of those who had already earned authority. As the first hour of inspection passed, Ryan noticed subtle changes among the veterans. Some whispers quieted, replaced with neutral nods, brief glances of acknowledgement. His posture remained flawless, yet he sensed a shift in perception. The mocking smiles had faded, replaced with measured respect. Even if unspoken, the acknowledgement was palpable. Confidence, when combined with precision and restraint, was beginning to speak louder than words. Ryan allowed himself a quiet, internal exhale. He had survived the first stage of evaluation without faltering, but he knew the most critical moment was approaching, the SEAL commander's scrutiny. The final drill of this inspection segment required a complex series of movements, integrating salutes, turns, and precise spacing in formation. Ryan executed each maneuver with calm determination, muscles responding instinctively, mind sharply focused on rhythm and alignment. The officers around him executed with varying degrees of competence, some faltering slightly under pressure, but Ryan remained unwavering. The air was thick with anticipation. The presence of elite SEALs heightened the tension. Every motion he made, every controlled movement of his body, reinforced his presence, a silent statement that he belonged here, even among the most seasoned professionals. Finally, the drill concluded, and the whistle blew sharply, signaling a brief pause. Ryan exhaled slowly, muscles still tense, but proud of flawless execution. He knew that he had performed well under scrutiny, yet he also knew the inspection was far from over. The true test, the encounter with the SEAL commander, was imminent. Every whisper, every glance, every subtle judgment had led to this point. And for the first time, Ryan felt the anticipation of recognition, an invisible threshold, where competence and composure would finally be acknowledged by those who commanded true respect. The whistle blew again, signaling another adjustment in the formation. Lieutenant Ryan snapped to attention instantly, boots hitting the concrete with precision. His eyes, forward and unwavering, scanned the horizon, taking in the rows of soldiers around him. Yet despite his focus, he couldn't ignore the low murmur that had begun to ripple among the senior officers. Whispered comments, thinly veiled smirks, and subtle glances began circulating, each one like a tiny needle pricking at his composure. He knew this was the next stage of the unspoken test. Could he maintain dignity under sustained psychological pressure? One officer leaned toward another, voice barely audible above the cadence of marching boots. "Look at him trying so hard," he whispered. "Do you think he even knows what he's doing?" Another chuckled softly, glancing at Ryan's patches and ribbons with a mix of amusement and skepticism. "Fresh out of the academy. I bet he'll fold under pressure." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he refused to react. Anger or defensiveness would only play into their hands. Instead, he reminded himself that composure, like discipline, was a weapon. The louder the whispers, the stronger his silence needed to be. He focused on the rhythm of his boots and the precise swing of his arms, letting each motion anchor him. Around him, minor mistakes began appearing in the formation. A toe out of alignment, a hand slightly off rhythm. The mocking officer's laughter, though quiet, intensified. One stepped closer, muttering under his breath, "He'll never last the full inspection." Ryan felt the familiar heat of irritation, a burning mix of pride and frustration, but he blocked it out. This was mental endurance as much as physical performance. The ability to remain unmoved under ridicule was the ultimate measure of strength here. The SEAL team watched silently, like statues of focus and control. Their eyes were calm but penetrating, observing not only Ryan's execution, but his reaction to the whispers and mockery surrounding him. He realized something vital. These men had been tested in ways that words could not describe, yet they recognized true composure immediately. This was not the place for showmanship or bravado. Subtlety, resilience, and inner control mattered far more than any polished salute or gleaming boot. Ryan's confidence grew quietly, not from arrogance, but from understanding that endurance under scrutiny would speak louder than any verbal defense. The mocking escalated further. Another officer, older and more imposing, approached Ryan with a faint smirk. "Lieutenant, is that the best you've got?" he asked, voice barely audible, but dripping with condescension. Ryan's fingers flexed inside his gloves. He forced a slow, measured exhale, holding his position and maintaining perfect posture. He didn't reply. Any verbal retort would have been a surrender to their attempt at undermining him. Instead, his silence, steady and deliberate, became a statement. He would not be shaken by petty ridicule. Around him, other junior officers began to falter. Some whispered apologies to each other, adjusting uniforms repeatedly, desperately seeking approval. The contrast between their anxious fumbling and his controlled movements became glaring. Ryan realized that the mockery wasn't just personal. It was a test of endurance, a pressure cooker designed to expose weakness. Every whisper, every snicker, every thinly veiled jab was a psychological assault. Yet he found a strange clarity in this environment. With each moment of composure, he was proving something invisible, undeniable, and enduring. The inspection officer returned to the line, clipboard in hand, noting minor discrepancies with a clinical eye. Ryan's form remained impeccable, and the officer paused slightly longer in front of him. tilting his head as if to catalog subtle nuances. "Good posture," he muttered softly. Ryan exhaled internally, allowing a fraction of relief to seep in. But he remained outwardly still, aware that the next wave of scrutiny was inevitable. Around him, the whispers didn't stop. The mocking officers had only increased their efforts, sensing that their target remained steadfast. One officer whispered loudly enough for Ryan to catch, "Do you think he's pretending, or is he really confident?" Another replied, "Confidence doesn't last long in situations like this." "Watch him break." Ryan felt a ripple of irritation, but countered it with mental discipline. His focus sharpened further, zeroing in on the precision of his own movements. Every pivot, every salute, every synchronized step became a meditation. The mockery had become a tool away to measure his inner stability. The more they tested him, the more resolute he felt. A subtle change in the SEAL's posture caught Ryan's attention. They shifted slightly, as though recognizing his steady endurance, a silent acknowledgement that he was holding his own. The mocking officers seemed oblivious to this, continuing their whispered jabs and smirks. Yet Ryan noticed the difference. True authority recognized competence, even if it was unspoken. This realization strengthened him further. The mockery of inexperienced or insecure officers was irrelevant. What mattered was the silent evaluation of those who had earned real respect. The inspection escalated into more complex drills. Commands were shouted sharply, requiring split-second reactions and exact synchronization. Ryan executed flawlessly, muscles responding with trained precision, mind calm and focused. He felt the heat of the sun, the tension in the line, and the weight of dozens of eyes upon him, yet he moved with unwavering discipline. Every motion, every calculated adjustment, became a silent rebuttal to the mocking whispers surrounding him. He was not defending verbally. He was proving through action, letting his competence speak where words could not. As the minutes stretched, Ryan noticed a few officers shifting uneasily. The subtle nods and glances among the veterans hinted that they were beginning to reassess him. The mocking had not ceased entirely, but cracks appeared in the facade of those attempting to belittle him. Confidence, as silent as it was contagious. Even in the midst of ridicule, Ryan felt a surge of quiet empowerment. The mockery could not penetrate a foundation built on discipline, training, and focus. An officer attempted another jab, walking close to Ryan with a faint smirk. "You really think you belong here?" he asked under his breath. Ryan's lips pressed together in a controlled line. He did not reply, did not flinch, and maintained perfect posture. Each step in formation, each crisp salute, each pivot in cadence became a quiet yet powerful statement. He belonged not because he demanded respect, but because he earned it through discipline and composure. The mocking officer paused slightly, the smirk faltering, though he didn't yet acknowledge defeat. Time seemed to slow as the mockery continued, each whispered comment a test of endurance. Ryan felt the tension in his body, muscles taut but controlled. Every glance, every subtle gesture was part of a mental chess game, testing his ability to remain unshaken under sustained scrutiny. The SEALs continued to watch quietly, their calm presence an invisible anchor. For the first time, Ryan realized the difference between mere observation and true recognition, the silent assessment of someone who had faced far greater pressures and could discern character at a glance. Finally, the preliminary mockery began to lose momentum. The subtle nods of approval among the veterans increased, though unspoken. The whispering officers began to notice his unwavering composure, their smirks fading slightly. The lesson became evident. Endurance under ridicule mattered more than outward demonstrations of skill. Ryan's confidence solidified, a quiet but undeniable force. The mockery had not been broken entirely, but the power balance was shifting, and Ryan's resilience was becoming visible to all who had eyes to see. As the formation paused briefly for a water break, Ryan remained poised, careful not to give any sign of frustration or fatigue. He adjusted his gloves, checked his posture subtly, and allowed his breathing to settle into a calm rhythm. The mocking officers exchanged glances, uncertain now, realizing their attempts had failed to destabilize him. Even in this brief respite, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Patience, discipline, and composure had begun to yield results, setting the stage for the most critical test, the SEAL commander's arrival. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the tarmac, casting sharp shadows across rows of soldiers. Ryan could feel the tension of the morning settling into something heavier, a prelude to the approaching moment of recognition. The mockery had escalated, reached its peak, and now it was dissolving under the weight of his steady resolve. The line between failure and respect was razor thin, and Ryan had held firm. Each moment of composure became a brick in a foundation of earned authority, silent and unassailable. And then, in the back of his mind, a quiet anticipation began to build. He knew what was coming next. The SEAL commander, the ultimate arbiter of skill, discipline, and authority, would soon approach. Every whisper, every subtle jab, every fleeting smirk from the mocking officers had prepared him for this moment. Ryan's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from readiness. He was poised, disciplined, and focused, ready to face the final test, where words would no longer matter, and only presence and earned respect would speak. The sharp blast of the whistle rang across the tarmac, cutting through the morning heat and tension like a blade. Lieutenant Ryan snapped to attention immediately, heels together, chin high, posture flawless. Around him, the rows of soldiers responded with the same precision, a collective display of discipline that contrasted sharply with the murmurs and subtle smirks that had lingered earlier. But even as the formation maintained its rhythm, Ryan felt a change in the air, a subtle shift that set every nerve on alert. Something significant was approaching. He could see them first, long before their presence truly registered. The SEAL commander and his small team of elite operators, moving with the kind of calm confidence that radiated authority without words. Their strides were measured, their shoulders relaxed, yet undeniably powerful, each step purposeful and controlled. The mocking officers fell silent immediately, a subtle but palpable shift as they sensed the weight of true command. Even the wind seemed to pause momentarily as the commander's shadow fell over the tarmac, a silent harbinger of scrutiny that could pierce pretense and see into character. Ryan's pulse quickened not with fear, but anticipation. The whispers and sneers from earlier faded completely, as if the presence of the SEALs had sucked the air from the moment, leaving only disciplined precision and absolute attention. Every muscle in his body tightened, not with tension, but readiness. He straightened instinctively, spine rigid, arms at perfect attention, fingers extended naturally at his sides. Training alone had prepared him for drills and commands, but this, the presence of someone whose reputation alone commanded respect, was different. This was a test of composure at the highest level, and he felt every ounce of scrutiny settle on him like weighty fog. The commander's gaze swept the rows of assembled soldiers with surgical precision, each movement deliberate. His eyes, dark and steady, scanned insignias, ribbons, and patches, absorbing not just appearance, but presence, the subtle rhythm of confidence, posture, and composure. When his gaze paused on a soldier, even briefly, it was like an invisible hand assessing every layer of character, measuring skill, focus, and endurance. Ryan felt the weight of that gaze, yet instead of flinching, he allowed it to sharpen his awareness, attuning him to the cadence of his heartbeat and the rhythm of his movements. As the SEAL team approached, Ryan noticed the subtle ripple in the formation. Even the mocking officers, previously so vocal in their condescension, now stood rigid, faces taut with a mixture of respect and apprehension. Whispers had ceased entirely. Only the sound of boots against concrete remained, sharp and synchronized. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation and silent judgment. Ryan felt a strange exhilaration in the tension, the culmination of years of training and endurance, distilled into this precise moment. The inspection officer stepped aside respectfully, clipboard lowered, as the SEAL commander moved toward the front of the line. Every motion, every gesture, carried authority. The commander's eyes scanned quickly, yet thoroughly, a constant reminder that nothing here could be hidden. Ryan's gaze remained forward, fingers tight at his sides, absorbing every detail. The tilt of the commander's head, the measured pace of his stride, the slight narrowing of his eyes when something drew attention. It was a language of power, and Ryan knew he had to respond with his own subtle vocabulary of composure. When the commander's gaze finally landed on Ryan, time seemed to stretch. The whistle of the wind, the hum of distant engines, even the footsteps of other soldiers, all seemed to slow. Ryan felt an almost physical pressure, as if invisible scales were weighing him, measuring his poise, his skill, his very presence. He did not flinch. He did not shift. Every muscle, every nerve, every line of posture was taut, controlled, and deliberate. In that silence, he realized that the judgment he was about to receive was not of words or ceremony. It was of presence, competence, and the quiet assertion of authority earned over years of experience. The mocking officers shifted uncomfortably, their smirks vanishing completely. Some straightened instinctively, as if reminded that true command had arrived. Ryan felt a small surge of inner satisfaction, not arrogance, but recognition that patience, discipline, and composure could withstand even the most intense scrutiny. Around him, subtle nods and glances indicated that others had begun to notice the same thing. The unwavering focus, the calm endurance, and the precise execution of movement that radiated quiet strength. He was no longer just a target of mockery. He had become a participant in a higher evaluation. The SEAL commander paused, a deliberate stop that drew the attention of the entire formation. His eyes swept across Ryan's uniform, lingering slightly on the patch. Ryan's chest tightened with anticipation. Every detail had been meticulously prepared, the polish of his boots, the alignment of his ribbons, the crispness of his uniform. But here, it was not just appearance that mattered. The commander's gaze seemed to probe deeper, measuring confidence, experience, and the invisible weight of earned respect. The silence became almost tangible, pressing in on all sides, a test of endurance and character that Ryan felt in every fiber of his being. He felt a subtle shift in energy around him. The mocking officers, who had previously thrived on condescension, now seemed aware that their assumptions were undercut by something they could not manipulate. Whispers ceased entirely. A tense silence spread through the ranks. Ryan held his posture, unwavering, letting the tension solidify into a form of quiet assertion. Every movement, every small adjustment of the shoulders, every controlled breath became a statement. The SEAL commander was watching, not judging with words, but assessing with presence, and Ryan knew that this moment could define his reputation for years to come. The commander extended his hand briefly to signal a pause, then turned his head to scan the rest of the formation. Each soldier felt the weight of his scrutiny. Ryan's focus sharpened, attuned to the rhythm of his own heartbeat, every nerve alert yet calm. He realized that this moment was more than evaluation. It was an opportunity to demonstrate resilience under sustained pressure, to show that discipline and composure could withstand even the most intense psychological and professional scrutiny. Finally, the commander's gaze returned to Ryan, lingering slightly longer than before. Ryan's spine stiffened with anticipation, his hands at perfect attention, chin elevated. Then, with deliberate precision, the commander pointed directly at Ryan's patch. The line of sight was unmistakable, deliberate, and charged with authority. The surrounding whispers and judgments evaporated in an instant, replaced by a collective sense of anticipation. Ryan's heart raced, not with fear, but with recognition that this was the pivotal moment of validation he had been waiting for. The silent acknowledgement of earned competence. The SEAL commander's voice broke the silence, low, measured, and carrying the weight of experience. This outranks yours. The simplicity of the statement carried immense authority. Every mocking officer froze, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. Ryan felt a surge of pride, relief, and quiet triumph all at once. The years of training, endurance, and composure had culminated in this instant, a recognition that transcended rank, uniform, or ceremony. It was earned, undeniable, and immediate. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The mocking officers struggled to mask their surprise. The SEALs nodded ever so slightly, acknowledging the invisible hierarchy recognized in that single sentence. Ryan maintained perfect composure, chest rising and falling steadily, even as adrenaline surged through his veins. He realized, fully and profoundly, that respect was never about appearances. It was about competence, discipline, and the quiet assertion of authority through action. The inspection continued, but the energy had shifted irrevocably. The previous mockery was replaced with measured acknowledgement. Subtle nods and glances indicated that the balance of perception had changed. Ryan felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep awareness that he had endured and emerged stronger, recognized by those whose judgment truly mattered. The SEAL commander's intervention had not just validated his presence. It had elevated it, establishing a foundation of respect that would resonate far beyond this inspection. Ryan allowed himself a slow exhale, still maintaining perfect posture as the formation moved to the next set of drills. The weight of the morning, the scrutiny, the whispers, and the subtle mockery had been transformed into a foundation of earned authority. Every motion, every step, and every glance was now infused with the knowledge that true respect had been quietly granted. For the first time, Ryan felt an unshakable sense of belonging, a recognition that transcended words, that could only be earned through discipline, composure, and unwavering presence. The words echoed in Ryan's mind long after they had left the SEAL commander's mouth. This outranks yours. Simple, deliberate, and absolute. They carried the weight of authority, of experience, and of earned respect. For the first time that morning, Ryan felt a tangible shift in the atmosphere. The mocking officers who had whispered and smirked earlier now stood frozen, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. Even without overt acknowledgement, he could feel the subtle recalibration of perception, the invisible scales of judgment tilting in his favor. Ryan's chest rose and fell steadily, but his mind raced with realization. Those words weren't just about rank. They were about validation, earned through years of training, discipline, and composure. Every polished boot, every precisely aligned ribbon, every controlled movement had led to this moment. He understood, now more than ever, that respect could not be demanded, bought, or faked. It could only be proven quietly, under pressure, and his patience had been vindicated. The SEAL commander's presence lingered even as he moved down the line, continuing the inspection. But the ripple effect of his recognition had already spread. The mocking officers who had earlier smirked with condescension now hesitated, unsure how to interact with Ryan. Subtle glances were exchanged in unspoken acknowledgement that the balance of authority had shifted. Ryan felt a strange sense of quiet triumph. He had not needed to speak. His actions and composure had spoken for him. The transformation was subtle, almost invisible, but profoundly real. Around him, the energy of the formation had changed. Soldiers who had watched with skepticism now regarded him with cautious acknowledgement. The SEALs, always silent observers, now seemed to view him with the faintest hint of approval, their posture relaxed but attentive. Even the commanding officer with the clipboard, who had meticulously catalogued every movement, gave a subtle nod of recognition. Ryan felt an almost tangible validation. He had endured mockery, whispers, and the weight of scrutiny, and had emerged with not only composure, but the unspoken respect of the elite. As the inspection continued, Ryan felt a strange calm descend over him. The tension that had gripped his muscles all morning eased slightly, replaced by a steady awareness of accomplishment. He remained alert, focused, and precise, but there was now a quiet confidence underlying every motion. The rhythm of his movements, salutes, pivots, and synchronized steps carried a subtle authority. He realized that the recognition he had received was not just external. It had seeped into his own perception, transforming fear and tension into strength and determination. The mocking officers attempted subtle jabs again, whispering among themselves, but their words carried less weight now. Ryan noticed the faltering confidence in their glances, the hesitation in their movements. Their mockery no longer pierced. It bounced harmlessly off the armor of composure he had built over the morning. He understood that authority, once quietly acknowledged by true power, reshapes perception. Respect here was no longer a possibility. It was a quiet inevitability, anchored in competence and presence. Ryan's mind drifted briefly to the journey that had led him here. Years of grueling training, early mornings, physical and mental endurance tests, countless drills repeated until muscle memory was instinct. Every element of his preparation had converged in this moment. The hours of study and practice, the discipline instilled by mentors, the silent lessons in restraint and patience, they were no longer abstract concepts. They were tangible, validated through recognition by the elite. The patch on his uniform, once a symbol of inexperience to the mocking officers, now radiated authority, silently commanding acknowledgement. Even the subtle expressions of other soldiers confirmed the transformation. Those who had once glanced at him with thinly veiled amusement now held measured attention, observing his movements with quiet respect. Ryan realized the power of endurance under scrutiny. The mockery, whispers, and subtle tests were not designed merely to demean. They were an opportunity to demonstrate resilience, patience, and character. He had met each challenge with unwavering focus, and the result was undeniable. Presence, when combined with competence, had proven stronger than mockery. The SEAL commander moved along the formation with measured steps, eyes still scanning each soldier. Ryan remained perfectly aligned, yet he could feel the silent acknowledgement of his endurance. There was no need for further words. Recognition had already been granted. The commander's statement had transformed the subtle dynamics of the group. What had been an environment of whispered doubt and ridicule had become one of cautious acknowledgement and measured respect. Ryan's understanding of authority deepened in that moment. True recognition was quiet, unspoken, yet unmistakable. Ryan's focus remained absolute. Every muscle, every step, every gesture was executed with precision, but there was now a subtle shift in energy. Confidence, once fragile and tentative under scrutiny, now flowed naturally. The experience had changed him. He understood that composure, endurance, and patience were more than survival tools. They were the language of authority. The mockery, once a source of anxiety, had become a mirror reflecting his resilience, revealing strengths even he hadn't fully appreciated. The rest of the inspection proceeded with careful precision. Commands were executed flawlessly, maneuvers were precise, and every detail was observed. Ryan moved with the knowledge that he had already passed the first, most critical test, enduring ridicule and scrutiny without faltering. Each movement carried an unspoken authority, the kind that does not need words to command attention. The mocking officers were reduced to silent observers, their influence diminished by the undeniable display of composure and skill. Ryan allowed himself a moment of internal reflection. The morning had tested more than his technical skills. It had tested his patience, mental resilience, and ability to maintain focus under sustained scrutiny. The SEAL commander's recognition had validated not only his performance, but the quiet, persistent strength he had cultivated over years of preparation. It was a lesson in the profound difference between rank and respect. The former could be granted, the latter had to be earned. The formation continued to execute drills, each step precise, each salute perfect. Ryan noticed the subtle change in interactions around him. The mockers no longer attempted derision. Their eyes held uncertainty, their postures had shifted, and some offered the faintest nods of acknowledgement. The quiet recognition that had been granted by the SEAL commander had rippled outward, subtly transforming the perception of the entire group. Ryan felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered by humility. He understood that respect earned in silence was often far more powerful than that demanded through words. As the inspection moved toward its conclusion, Ryan maintained flawless execution. His body had become a vessel for disciplined precision, his mind a testament to controlled endurance. The weight of earlier mockery had transformed into a foundation of strength. He realized the true meaning of the commander's words. They were not a simple statement of rank, but a validation of his resilience, discipline, and ability to withstand scrutiny without compromise. For the first time that morning, Ryan felt complete confidence in himself. The mockery, whispers, and condescension of his peers had no power over him. His endurance had been tested, and he had emerged stronger. The recognition he received was not fleeting. It had altered the subtle dynamics of the formation, shifted the perception of his peers, and instilled in him a quiet authority. The patch on his uniform was no longer just a symbol of rank. It was a testament to earned respect, silently acknowledged by those who truly understood authority. Even as the final whistles blew and the formation began to disperse, Ryan remained alert, posture perfect, yet internally calm. He knew the lessons of the morning would linger far beyond this inspection. Endurance under scrutiny, composure in the face of ridicule, and the quiet power of earned authority. The SEAL commander's acknowledgement had crystallized the invisible hierarchy of respect, making it tangible in ways that words alone could never achieve. As he stepped away from the formation, Ryan allowed himself a slow, deliberate exhale. The tension that had gripped his muscles since arrival loosened, replaced with a profound awareness of accomplishment. He had survived the mockery, maintained composure under scrutiny, and earned recognition from one of the most respected figures on the base. The experience had not only validated his training, but had reshaped his understanding of authority, discipline, and respect. Ryan's gaze drifted across the base, observing other soldiers and the subtle shifts in their behavior. Even those who had mocked him earlier now regarded him with measured acknowledgement. The transformation was quiet, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. Respect, he realized, was not a reward for loud declarations or visible bravado. It was a reflection of competence, patience, and resilience. The SEAL commander's words had been brief, but their impact was profound, shaping not just the perception of others, but the foundation of Ryan's own confidence and understanding of authority. The morning's tension had finally lifted, but the effects of the inspection lingered like a charged current in the air. Lieutenant Ryan walked slowly along the tarmac, each step deliberate, posture still impeccable. Yet inside, a quiet sense of transformation hummed. The words of the SEAL commander, "This outranks yours," continued to echo in his mind. They had shifted something fundamental, not just how others perceived him, but how he perceived himself. For the first time in a long while, he felt the alignment of respect and competence, silent, earned, and absolute. He observed the previously mocking officers from the corner of his eye. Their subtle glances toward him had changed. No longer were they filled with smug superiority or amusement. Instead, there was a mixture of hesitation, recognition, and in some cases, quiet admiration. They had tested him with ridicule, expecting cracks, but his composure had been unyielding. In that realization, Ryan understood something vital. True authority didn't need to shout or demand attention. It revealed itself quietly, through discipline, restraint, and unwavering consistency. A few of the senior non-commissioned officers, who had whispered earlier, approached cautiously. Their steps were measured, voices subdued. One, older and grizzled, cleared his throat. "Lieutenant," he began, eyes studying Ryan carefully, "your form, composure. It's solid. You held under pressure." Ryan nodded, acknowledging the words without arrogance. It was strange to hear praise after so many minutes of derision, but he recognized the subtle shift in tone. This wasn't superficial flattery. It was validation, grounded in experience and observation. Even the younger officers, who had been flustered and fidgeting during the inspection, seemed to view him differently now. Small gestures, a nod, a brief eye contact, a respectful pause conveyed acknowledgement of his endurance and competence. Ryan realized that respect had a ripple effect. It could quietly reshape interactions and subtly elevate perception, even in environments previously dominated by ridicule or skepticism. The transformation was invisible to some, but undeniable to those paying attention. He allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The morning had been a crucible, testing not just technical skill, but mental endurance and composure under scrutiny. The mockery and whispers had been intended to destabilize him. Yet in responding with calm determination, he had converted that pressure into authority. The recognition he had earned from the SEAL commander was more than symbolic. It had altered the hierarchy of perception. In the silent acknowledgement, Ryan understood that competence and composure were more enduring than superficial displays of rank. As the formation began to disperse, Ryan moved among his peers with measured steps. He noticed subtle shifts in body language. Those who had mocked him earlier now offered brief nods of acknowledgement or maintained eye contact with quiet respect. He did not gloat or assert dominance. He allowed the authority he had earned to manifest naturally through presence and demeanor. This was a lesson in subtlety. Respect is most powerful when it is earned and felt, not demanded. One officer approached, a young lieutenant who had been particularly vocal in the mocking earlier. He extended his hand, voice careful, yet respectful. "Lieutenant Ryan, I underestimated you," he admitted. Ryan shook the hand firmly, nodding once. "Thank you. It takes time to understand a situation fully," he replied calmly, the words steady and sincere. There was no condescension, no hint of triumph, only acknowledgement and a quiet assertion of authority. The exchange left an impression on the officer, a subtle realignment of respect that extended far beyond the immediate interaction. Ryan continued walking, observing subtle interactions unfolding around him. Small changes, hesitations replaced with deference, whispers replaced with measured conversation. Previously flustered officers, moving with a steadier rhythm, demonstrated the power of recognition. The morning had been more than an inspection. It had been a lesson in human behavior, authority, and the quiet mechanics of influence. One moment of acknowledgement from someone with true authority had reshaped the dynamics of the group in ways subtle yet profound. He found a quiet corner to gather his thoughts, allowing himself a rare pause. The sunlight now hung higher in the sky, casting long, sharp shadows across the tarmac. Ryan reflected on the morning's events, the mockery, the drills, the SEAL commander's recognition. Each element had contributed to a lesson far deeper than mere rank or skill. Discipline, patience, composure, and endurance under pressure were not just professional requirements. They were the foundation of respect, the invisible currency that governed relationships and authority within the ranks. Ryan's gaze drifted to the patch on his uniform, the very one that had initially sparked derision. Now, it felt like a symbol of quiet achievement. It was more than a marker of rank, It was a tangible reminder of resilience, training, and composure under sustained scrutiny. The small emblem, once a target of mockery, had become a beacon of earned authority. He touched it lightly, a gesture of acknowledgement to himself, a quiet affirmation of the journey he had navigated and the endurance he had demonstrated. The seals moved nearby, their presence a silent reassurance. Ryan noted subtle nods and brief eye contact from the team, recognition that extended beyond rank. They didn't need words. The acknowledgement was conveyed in presence, posture, and the subtle weight of attention. Ryan realized that earning respect from those who understood true authority required more than skill. It required character, composure, and the ability to maintain focus under the pressure of scrutiny and ridicule. He noticed the mocking officers lingering at a distance, their expressions unreadable but changed. A subtle shift in power dynamics was undeniable. Whispers had ceased. Body language had altered. Even without explicit acknowledgement, their perception of him had been transformed by his resilience and the SEAL commander's validation. Ryan understood that authority, once recognized by those who commanded it, had a quiet gravity that could reshape relationships and influence behavior without overt assertion. As the morning wore on, Ryan observed further interactions among his peers. Those previously flustered now moved with steadier confidence, inspired subtly by his example. Recognition, once granted, had a cascading effect, reinforcing discipline and respect in ways that were intangible yet profound. Ryan felt a sense of responsibility settle over him not as arrogance, but as an understanding that influence and authority carried with them the obligation to model composure, endurance, and ethical conduct. A fellow lieutenant approached, glancing at Ryan with a tentative smile. "You handled that inspection impressively," he admitted quietly. Ryan nodded, maintaining his calm demeanor. "It's about composure under pressure," he replied. The simplicity of the statement carried weight, conveying both humility and authority. Recognition had transformed more than perception. It had provided Ryan a framework for understanding leadership not as a position, but as an earned and quietly communicated responsibility. Ryan allowed himself a slow exhale, the tension of the morning finally easing from his muscles. The inspection, the mockery, the judgment, and the ultimate recognition had not only tested his endurance, but also reshaped his understanding of influence, respect, and authority. The journey from derision to acknowledgement had been grueling, yet the lessons were now indelibly etched in his mind. Every glance, every movement, every interaction had become part of a larger understanding of how respect is earned and recognized in subtle yet profound ways. As the formation disbanded completely, Ryan remained vigilant, walking among his peers with measured steps. He noticed small gestures, a nod here, a brief acknowledgement there, that reflected the subtle but undeniable shift in perception. The patch on his uniform, once a source of ridicule, now symbolized quiet authority. The SEAL commander's words had left a lasting imprint, altering both his internal confidence and the behavior of those around him. He understood fully that true respect is silent, earned, and profoundly transformative. Finally, as the morning sun climbed higher, Ryan allowed himself a moment of reflection, standing apart from the dispersing formation. The experience had tested him in ways that went far beyond drills and inspections. It had revealed the power of composure, patience, and endurance under scrutiny. Mockery had been transformed into acknowledgement, whispers into respect. The lessons of the morning were clear. Authority was earned quietly, demonstrated through consistent discipline, and recognized by those who understood its weight. Ryan straightened, feeling the quiet confidence settle fully into his posture. The mockery had been conquered, the scrutiny endured, and the respect earned. He had emerged from the crucible of the morning, not just as a competent officer, but as someone whose presence now carried the subtle authority that comes from resilience, composure, and earned recognition. The journey was far from over, but the foundation had been laid, solid and unshakable. The afternoon sun cast long, sharp shadows across the base, as Lieutenant Ryan stood quietly near the edge of the tarmac, observing the remaining soldiers completing drills under the watchful eyes of their instructors. The morning's inspection and the SEAL commander's recognition had left a profound impact on him, subtly reshaping not only his perception of himself, but also how others interacted with him. For the first time, Ryan felt an enduring sense of authority, not demanded, not forced, but quietly earned and naturally acknowledged by those around him. As he watched, he reflected on the sequence of events that had brought him to this moment. The mockery of his peers had been relentless, each whispered comment and thinly veiled smirk designed to unsettle him. At first, he had felt the familiar heat of frustration and the urge to respond defensively. But he had held firm, relying on years of training, discipline, and controlled composure. By transforming pressure into focus, ridicule into resolve, he had proven something far deeper than simple competence: resilience under scrutiny. The SEAL commander's words, "This outranks yours," had been brief, yet they carried the gravity of earned experience. It was a subtle acknowledgement, an invisible stamp of approval that bypassed ceremony and hierarchy. Those words had transformed the dynamics of the entire formation. Even the most vocal critics now approached him with measured caution, their gestures subdued and eyes reflecting newfound respect. Ryan realized that authority, once silently validated by those who understood it, had a ripple effect far beyond the initial interaction. He glanced down at the patch on his uniform. It had been a source of ridicule that morning, a target for condescension and mockery. Now it symbolized endurance, composure, and earned respect. Every polished boot, precisely aligned ribbon, and controlled movement had contributed to this quiet authority. Ryan understood that symbols, while powerful, held meaning only when paired with action and character. The patch was no longer just insignia. It was a testament to resilience and the subtle demonstration of competence under pressure. Nearby, the previously mocking officers lingered, attempting casual conversation or observing the drills with subdued attention. Their body language had shifted. Whispers had ceased, replaced by measured acknowledgement. Ryan noticed small, almost imperceptible nods, gestures of respect that carried more weight than any overt praise. Authority and recognition, he realized, were far more powerful when subtle, unspoken, and grounded in competence rather than theatrics. The lesson was clear. True respect was earned quietly, maintained consistently, and acknowledged by those who understood its value. Ryan's thoughts turned inward. He had learned that endurance was more than physical strength or technical skill. It was a measure of character. Composure in the face of mockery and scrutiny was not simply about appearing confident. It was about cultivating an inner stability that remained unshaken regardless of external pressures. By responding with calm and controlled presence, he had demonstrated authority in a way that words alone could never achieve. Recognition, he realized, flows naturally from consistent action, patience, and restraint. The SEALs moved nearby, performing their own exercises with effortless precision. Ryan watched them briefly, noticing the subtle nods and brief glances they cast his way. Unlike the mocking officers or the inspectors with clipboards, their acknowledgement was quiet but undeniable. It carried weight because it came from those who had faced extreme challenges and understood what it meant to earn respect. Ryan felt a renewed sense of validation, not from rank alone, but from the recognition of competence and composure by those who had mastered both. As the afternoon progressed, Ryan observed the subtle ways the morning's events had shifted the culture around him. Soldiers who had been hesitant now moved with steadier confidence. Junior officers who had once whispered condescending remarks approached him with measured acknowledgement. Even routine interactions carried an undertone of respect. Ryan realized that recognition, when granted by authority figures who truly understood skill and composure, transforms not only perception but behavior. The morning had become a lesson not only in endurance, but in leadership and influence. A fellow lieutenant approached him cautiously, a faint smile on his face. "Lieutenant Ryan, I just wanted to say that what you demonstrated today, it's impressive." Not many could have held under that level of scrutiny. Ryan nodded calmly, maintaining his composed demeanor. "Thank you," he replied. "It's about focus, patience, and composure under pressure. That's what earns respect in the long run." The lieutenant's eyes reflected understanding, a subtle acknowledgement that the principles Ryan had exemplified were far more enduring than rank alone. Ryan allowed himself a quiet exhale, his mind reflecting on the lessons of the morning. The mockery, the whispers, the intense inspection, each had been a crucible, testing endurance, patience, and character. By maintaining composure and responding with precision rather than words, he had earned acknowledgement from those who truly understood authority. The SEAL commander's brief but weighty words had cemented the transformation, creating a ripple effect that had subtly altered the dynamics of the formation and reshaped perception. He considered the journey that had brought him here. Years of disciplined training, physical endurance, mental preparation, and repeated drills had all contributed to his ability to maintain focus under pressure. Yet the morning's events had revealed something deeper. Respect and authority were earned not simply through performance, but through resilience, composure, and the quiet demonstration of character. These were lessons that would resonate far beyond a single inspection, influencing every interaction, decision, and challenge he faced in the future. Ryan's gaze returned to the patch on his uniform. It had become more than insignia. It was now a symbol of his endurance, discipline, and earned authority. Every soldier, officer, and observer who had witnessed the inspection had, in some way, recognized the subtle power of composure and resilience. The mockery of the morning had been transformed into acknowledgement and respect, a testament to the quiet influence of presence and earned credibility. The SEAL commander approached briefly as the drills concluded, walking with the same deliberate, measured confidence as before. Ryan stood at attention, chest rising and falling steadily, eyes forward. The commander's gaze swept over him, and without a word, a subtle nod conveyed acknowledgement of competence and composure. The gesture was brief, but profound, a silent reinforcement of the lessons the morning had imparted. Ryan felt a surge of quiet pride and understanding, knowing that recognition had been fully cemented through action and endurance. As the base began to settle into routine activities, Ryan reflected on the broader implications of the day. Leadership, he realized, was not about asserting dominance or demanding respect. It was about earning it quietly, consistently, and through resilience under pressure. The mockery and scrutiny had tested his character, revealing both weaknesses and strengths. By responding with discipline, composure, and unwavering focus, he had not only earned acknowledgement from the SEAL commander, but had subtly transformed the perception of those around him. Ryan's confidence was no longer tentative. It was grounded in the enduring knowledge that true authority is demonstrated, not proclaimed. The lessons of the morning would remain with him: patience, endurance, composure, and the quiet power of earned recognition. Every interaction moving forward would carry the subtle influence of that experience, shaping both his own approach to leadership and the perception of those around him. Finally, as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the base, Ryan allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The morning's crucible had tested him physically, mentally, and emotionally. He had endured mockery, whispers, and intense scrutiny. He had maintained composure under pressure, executed movements with precision, and demonstrated discipline that earned acknowledgement from one of the most respected figures on the base. The experience had reshaped both perception and self-understanding. He straightened fully, chest rising, shoulders squared, eyes forward. The patch on his uniform, once a target for ridicule, now radiated quiet authority. The SEAL commander's words, the subtle nods of approval, and the transformation of his peers' perception had cemented lessons that would endure far beyond this single day. Ryan understood, finally and completely, that respect is earned through endurance, composure, and consistent demonstration of character under pressure. As he walked back toward his quarters, the base buzzing with routine activity, Ryan carried with him the invisible weight of recognition, the subtle authority earned in silence, and the knowledge that true leadership is grounded in competence, patience, and unwavering composure. The morning had been a crucible, but he had emerged not only unbroken but strengthened, his understanding of respect and authority forever transformed.